Welcome to the Milk Bottle e-commerce show, brought to you by Milk Bottle Labs, one of the world's top-rated accredited Shopify e-commerce experts. Founder Keith Matthews interviews e-commerce professionals, app developers and entrepreneurs to share as much digital knowledge and e-commerce tips and tricks as possible. This podcast is kindly supported by our go-to e-commerce tools. Rewind.io, the leading backup solution for Shopify, BigCommerce, Trello and more. Let's just say it's the cheapest insurance policy you'll ever get for your Shopify store and all your valuable data. Simply go to rewind.io/milk bottle to get your first month for free. We just love Klaviyo, our preferred automated email solution we use in every store build. No wonder it's trusted by over 65,000 ambitious growing brands worldwide. Find out more on klaviyo.com/milk bottle. Looking for easy accounting for e-commerce? Cinder can relieve you from manual data entry and automatically generate an accurate P&L report, balance sheet and inventory management for your business needs. A few clicks and you'll get access to the key metrics to find the hidden streams of income for your business. Use a coupon code EasyBooks for up to 40% off. Check out the show notes for further details.
Hey folks, welcome back. For episode 64, I am delighted to welcome Sharon Goldstein. And Sharon is the CEO of Limespot, which is a leading AI-driven merchandising app for Shopify. Sharon brings 20 years of leadership experience from both consumer retail and high-end growth SaaS companies, including Amazon, Shutterfly, ShipHawk, and Pixley. Now, Shutterfly is a company that I haven't heard from in a long, long time. In addition to her CEO role, Sharon is an advisor to multiple startups and a former executive residence at Xseed Capital, based in California. Sharon, how are you?
I am fantastic. How about yourself, Keith?
Good, Sharon. We took quite a while to arrange this interview, and I have to say thank you very much for being as flexible as possible timing-wise. We're in Dublin and you're in San Francisco, so it's fantastic to have you. I've heard you speak many, many times, and I was following the Limespot service for many years, probably prior to you even becoming CEO, so it's nice to finally talk to you to discuss the product. But first, before we go there, how is life in San Francisco right now?
Life in San Francisco is fantastic. You know, we have great weather this time of year. Summer is actually our worst month. So it's lovely to be here. And the COVID restrictions have just been lifted. And so it's really starting to feel like pre-2020 here.
So it's gradually coming back to normal?
Gradually coming back to normal.
That's good. Sharon, when I was doing some research, I see that you worked for a number of major corporates, major tech companies. One of them was Shutterfly. So you ended up in that kind of space for quite a few years in your career, didn't you?
I did. So I started my career post-MBA in the digital space. I was in audio and video services and joined Shutterfly actually to bring those digital services in and to do corp dev. And it really was my introduction to the retail world. We went ahead and bought, during the time I was there, Tiny Prints. Many people may know that brand. It's the premier brand within Shutterfly. And during that cycle, I've really learned about all of the value levers inside a retailer, that including, all the marketing KPIs, all the issues with acquisition, all the challenges around supply chain, which I hadn't seen since very early in my career. And it was a company that had legitimate personalization, right? I mean, that's all what the company was all about, as well as it had physical goods. So it was quite the introduction to the company, public company, and really a phenomenal opportunity to contribute.
You mentioned supply chain issues. Supply chain issues have become very, very prominent and to the front of the news lately, when in actual fact, if you're running any sort of business for the last 20 or 30 years, supply chain has always been a priority, but it seems to be in the news more. So given your experience there, I suppose, with what's happened during the pandemic, you were well versed and well experienced on that, because that was a concern of yours many years ago.
Absolutely. I've seen the supply chain world evolve from being, very much on paper, phone calls, to during the 2010s, really evolving to being services and being highly connected. And now we're seeing both Amazon and Shopify have platforms for fulfillment. And now we're seeing what the impact is even further downstream of product manufacturing, getting it in, right? All the issues we've seen with shortages during this period of time and how that's really affected the retailers. And we're not done with that, right? With chips, what's happening with the backup. And I don't know about in Europe, but in, the US and California, Long Beach, we have almost 100 carriers sitting off the coast that can't be processed fast enough. And that is impacting everyone all the way down to the consumers.
So Sharon, just to explain that to the international listeners that may not be aware, it is still the case that there is ships that are basically parked far out because they can't get in and they're effectively queuing like airplanes trying to land. Is that still the case?
It's my understanding that we are still backed up, yes.
Yeah. Interesting watching Twitter during the pandemic because people were measuring the potential backup based on the number of ships that were parked around the west coast of the States. So with the rise in demand, that might just be the new norm. Ports don't have the capacity to empty them, unfortunately.
Well, hopefully what we'll see is the ability to at least clear out that backlog. So I would expect that this is something that will eventually, hopefully in 2022, get cleared out and we'll start to get to a new norm.
Yeah, hopefully. Who knows what the future will bring. I've been following Limespot for quite a while, and it has evolved into a much bigger product, which, you can share the details of that, obviously. But before we go there, Sharon, I keep saying this, keep repeating myself on the podcast. I'm kind of intrigued and interested as to how people found Shopify. Given your tech experience prior to Limespot, were you very much aware of Shopify before you joined Limespot?
I was. So just a bit about my background. I went from Shutterfly to a company called ShipHawk, which is in the supply chain space and was servicing retailers in the post-purchase environment. And that company was, integrating with various platforms, and Shopify was definitely on our radar screen. From there, only because it's relevant to the story, I went to Amazon and actually did delivery experience on Amazon. So was seeing that behemoth and how that machine was running in delivery experience was basically productizing Prime benefits and the products that you see in the buying. And it's at that time that I really came back to looking at Shopify. And what I love about this ecosystem is really this goal of democratizing e-commerce, right? Amazon's such a large part, there are other large players like Argos in the world and Alibaba, but those marketplaces are such a large percentage of purchasing. And it's also a place where customers start their buying experience. They do their searches there. That anything you can do to help retailers be profitable and successful off of off of Amazon, and Shopify is one of those platforms, is really needed in the marketplace. So I saw this as a very powerful place, high growth place for contributing to the e-commerce world.
Yeah, I read recently that Google see the Amazon search bar as their biggest competitor, which to anybody not working in e-commerce, that mightn't sound obvious, but there's no doubt about it that Amazon have created and defined the rules, which most e-commerce companies on multiple other platforms are using as their base. So I've in the past criticized Amazon, but they've done a lot of good things, I have to say. And look, I can't remember the percentage of goods in the States that were purchased during the pandemic on Amazon, but they're doing a lot of things right. So fair play to them. Moving into Limespot, Sharon, can you explain to the listeners exactly what Limespot is?
Sure. So Limespot is an AI-driven personalization platform. And let me explain what that is. So we have 4 products in our fleet. The first one is a product recommendations product. We were first in the market, and we are still the top performing provider in that space. And that is one-to-one AI-driven recommendations that are everything you would expect from upsell and cross-sell to collections and you might like, trending, and the like. And the impact of putting those in place is that our retailers see anything that engages with that having a 2 to 5x increase in conversion, a 5% increase in AOV, and a higher retention rate. So that's our bread and butter product. That's what you likely knew about when you knew Limespot in its early days. So let me tell you a little bit about the other products. The second product we have is email personalization. And that is about taking both recommendations and, when I talk about it, segmented experiences, and bringing that into whatever your email platform is. So, you may be using Klaviyo or Omnisend or any of the other providers. And this is about taking real-time recommendations, dropping them into maybe, abandoned cart emails to see if you can drive people with similar products, or inspiration emails, and really using this to drive more consumers back to your website to do more buying. The third piece is, and it's interesting, we were just talking about Amazon and Google, is our integration with Google Shopping. So we have an offering that allows us to enrich a Shopify brand's e-commerce feed for Google, enrich it with our machine learning data. So basically everything that we learn off of the site, all of the tags that we've provided on it, whether it is, everything we pull out of natural language processing. So basically any terminology that you've provided, we can add it. And when we add that, we see retailers get a 2x plus improvement in their return on ad spend. So this is a place where we feel like we are really helping on the profitability of retailers and getting lower acquisition costs. And the fourth piece of our platform is called segmented experiences. And this is where we see personalization going. This is about the ability to real-time segment your consumers on site through a variety of different features, which I'm sure we'll get to at some point, and fully personalize that site experience. And that's, images and text and HTML and offers, and really create the best buying experience and the best customer journey for every customer, regardless of their experience with your brand and who they are.
Okay. So before we dig a bit deeper on the personalization, for the Shopify users that are listening, Shopify had this automated feature for years. Well, it's actually theme-based, whereby it will recommend a product, but it will only recommend the product based on the collection that product is in. So if you're selling apples and it's in the collection of fruit, well then if somebody's on the apple product, they'll see oranges and bananas and maybe pineapples underneath, which is a really basic kind of personalization. But a lot of Shopify users, especially new users, do actually think that there's a kind of an engine behind that, but there isn't, which is exactly where you guys come in. So personalization is a buzzword at the moment, Sharon, okay? If you were to summarize all of personalization, what does personalization encompass? Now, that's a big question, but can you distill it down for users with no real personalization experience, I suppose, on store? What is it?
Sure. So I think of personalization as a philosophy, and it is the philosophy of providing an end-to-end customer journey across all touch points to a user. And if you look at the world, so much is personalized for us, whether it's, Netflix and Amazon Prime, or it's your experiences buying on larger websites. The idea is that customers expect to feel known. 74% of customers have said they're less likely to buy on a site where they don't feel known. And feeling known is about understanding their needs and anticipating them and putting the right things in front of them. So, I'd look across our ecosystem and say there's a lot of applications that have personalization, and then loyalty is a driver for personalization. Email is a driver. Obviously, product recommendations are a driver. But really, the idea is the philosophy of trying to create these custom journeys.
Okay. If we were to simplify then, I suppose, again, for the listeners, if you go on to the Nike site and you're a female, well, if you've been on the site multiple times and you have been searching for female running shoes or running gear, what you would expect the next time you go on as one of those 74% of shoppers is that the store will present to you products which are connected to the products that you previously viewed, which makes perfect sense. Rewind.io is the leading backup solution for your Shopify store. Did you know that there's no way of recovering lost data? If your store is gaining traction, app developers or multiple staff may enter your store, and there's absolutely no way of fixing human error. Rewind.io allows you to rewind your store back to its original state, so you can reduce your business risk immediately with the Rewind app. It's so easy and is the cheapest and best insurance policy you'll ever need for your Shopify store. Get your first month for free by simply replying to your first email from Rewind and mention this podcast. Now, regular listeners will know I love Klaviyo. It's the single biggest revenue generator I've ever seen across hundreds and hundreds of Shopify stores I've been in. Klaviyo's data-driven marketing automation platform is sophisticated enough to power those legendary campaigns from the big brands you admire, but they make it simple, they make it easy, and they make it fast. To get started with a free trial of Klaviyo, visit klaviyo.com/milkbottle. That's klaviyo.com/milkbottle. So I suppose it's all very well to talk about personalization, but ultimately for the e-commerce store owner, if you're running your Magento store, your Shopify store, where are the gains for store owners, Sharon, if they do invest heavily in personalization?
Sure. I think the gains that they can see are across all four categories of how a merchant might think about their business. So there are gains in acquisition. Those gains, if you're using personalization for ad targeting or for Google, will be on how much it costs to acquire customers, as well as the ability to get in front of customers organically. The second would be conversion on the site, and that would be seeing higher conversions through the cart process, as well as seeing customers hitting their shipping bars and buying higher basket sizes. The third would really be retention. And that is that customers who feel known are proven to have a higher retention. So they're more likely to come back to the site and purchase. So really all the things that you think of as key goals of retailers are addressed and improved through a personalized experience.
Okay. So Sharon, if I was to add Limespot then to my Shopify store, what's the customer journey in terms of the merchant journey to get that up and running? One of the questions that we get a lot from Shopify store owners is, do I need 1 million users, for example, for this to work? So is it plug and play? Is there code involved? Is it something basically that we just switch on as a merchant and then you guys just look after the rest? What's that experience like for the users who basically sign up to your service?
That's a great question, Kate. So we started in the self-serve in the App Store experience, and our goal is for a retailer to be able to quickly set themselves up in the same session in which they install our products. So basically the way the experience would work is you go into the App Store, you install our app, we pull your catalog automatically from Shopify, we pull that information, we pull past orders, we basically create a virtual schematic of how your platform fits together. We do this all in the background, and that helps us understand immediately on your first experience with us, what is going to happen. But back to the tactics. So you install our product, we bring you tell us your categories so we can optimize our algorithms. You go into our designer, which is a very intuitive designer. You set your CSS, pull in that information, and then you can see your actual store pages in our designer, drop in the boxes you want, activate, and hit publish. And that's all you need to do. We have a 15-day free trial. And so you can literally be up and running, in an hour or two. For customers who are on our premium service, we take on some of that work and really get you set up so that we find those customers have more sophisticated needs and we can give you a dedicated CSS. But it's really easy for retailers of every size. You also asked about who, kind of retailer benefits. From a product recommendations perspective, we recommend that a brand has a minimum of 50 products. Really, that's the point in which the AI is going to drive significant value for them, and that you're propagating the right content into those boxes. We do have customers who have less than that. When you get to segmented experiences, for example, it does not matter how many products you have.
Okay, yeah, the 50 makes perfect sense. That is what I would have expected. Sharon, another buzzword, is segmentation. So I noticed that you mentioned the personalization through email Okay. And I see that you have a Klaviyo integration, and you also have, you guys are integrated to multiple other email platforms like Omnisend, Digital, HubSpot, Privy, all of the platforms that e-commerce owners will be familiar with. So can you just give us examples of how that specific email segmentation has been used? Because I think sometimes store owners get so caught up in, just like what we discussed earlier on, supply chain issues, and then also managing the store and getting orders out, and obviously building their customer base, that editing and switching on customizations that are connected, let's say, to a third-party resource such as email aren't necessarily always front and center. So can you just give us a rundown on what you mean when you talk about personalized emails being run on the back of Limespot?
Sure. So the email, and then I'd love to talk about more broadly segmentation, but the email personalization is really the ability to both pull in product recommendations, which would be real time based on what's in your catalog, as well as once you create segments, and we can actually sync our segments with Klaviyo. So you can use their segments or our segments. But once you create segments, really pulling in the full HTML of pages so that you can truly have an experience based on a segment. And that's simply a case of pulling in the HTML, we populate it. So it's a fairly straightforward experience for retailers. It does not take a lot of work, and it will drive real time the right experience for the consumer.
So pre-built segments in Klaviyo can be connected to Limespot, and customers will get emails based on where they were on the store, products that are relevant to their journey on the store.
I would say two different things there. One is that if you think about product recommendations and segmentation as separate, product recommendations are one-to-one. So you don't have to have segmentation functionality in order to drop, a product carousel into a page. It will call back to our servers based on what we know about the consumer or based on the kind of box you've put in there. It will be one-to-one targeted. If you're using segmentation, you can pull in, you obviously can update that box, but you can pull in other components. Those could be, different text real time, different offers, all that information can be pulled through. Because when we think about segmentation, email is really just the start of it. We are focused, as I said, on the full customer journey. So we have a segmentation engine that is the richest in the industry that pulls any behavior, right? So we do real-time segmentation within a session, which means as a customer moves through, we understand that customer's behavior, and we pull everything from what kind of products do they touch to what pages do they land in to what their past behavior is, to their geography, and all that information allows us to do segment experiences on site as well.
Okay. That's very, very powerful stuff. Very, very powerful.
Absolutely.
Sharon, we're at about 20 minutes, which is perfect timing. So I was going to go to the actionable tips, okay, which was the last one. But is there anything that you'd like to say or anything that you'd like to add?
Sure. Before we go to actionable tips, I guess let me just double click on the segmented experiences and what that could look like for a brand. So some of the things we see companies doing is, that at the highest level, we have some pet companies, and dog people and cat people don't tend to be the same people. So idea of immediately understanding which pet has been shopped for and creating an entire experience around that with images, with which collections you put forward to the consumer. We have brands that have made the unknown visitor versus the known visitor experience different. So an unknown visitor would be something like, one of our brands is pulling the reviews from Yapo onto the page so that it's like immediate credibility. They're pulling in visuals around the trending items, whereas you might put on that same page the recently viewed for a returning customer. And then another place where we see brands doing this is offering different offers to different customers who are coming in, and offering different offers based on geography. Maybe you knock out a couple of collections because you're not willing to have them overseas. You can put them in there. So that would be the one other comment I would put in there, is that, we're just at the beginning of seeing what brands of all sizes can do to create that next tier of personalization.
You made a very valid point. Isn't it wonderful that relatively new or relatively small e-commerce stores now have access to the same tools that traditionally enterprise businesses only had? It's nearly too good to be true in a way, and you obviously, as we discussed, you worked in Amazon, but these are the companies that are investing millions and millions, billions over many years, developing systems that are now moving backwards in the ecosystem to support, small Shopify stores and, across all of the platforms. So we're living in a wonderful time for e-commerce in so many ways. Obviously, as we discussed earlier as well, there's so many challenges. But before we go, in terms of some advice or tips on maximizing the value of personalization on an e-commerce store, what would you say to our listeners?
Sure. And I think of this as sort of a crawl, walk, run. So we'll talk about customers at different stages. So product recommendations, table stakes, as you mentioned, there's a really basic product that you can get from Shopify for free. Doesn't drive a lot of performance, but at least have that instead of anything else. What you should be doing, though, is using an AI-driven product recommendation platform. The things that I see brands doing as best practices there. The first one is you want to put recently viewed across your site. We see consumers use that as a secondary nav to really get back to the things that they care about. And so you're making it easy for them to drive through that. Obviously, product pages and collection pages, you want to have the right sorting and the right discovery in there. And then the other place is in cart, really making sure you have upsells and cross-sells in cart. And whether that's to have a shipping threshold or just in general, that's where you're going to increase your basket size. For customers who've moved beyond that, we talked about some of the techniques with email. Most important place to put your product recommendations is in your abandoned cart emails to ensure that even if that wasn't the perfect product, you have the chance to give a buyer the thing that was. Google. And then I would say if you have moved into the segment experience, then there's some really basic things you can do up front. The first one is to define the difference between a new and returning user so that a returning user has a better experience or at least a different experience. And the new user, it's an introduction to the brand. And you no longer have to say, which one am I putting on my homepage to fit both services? The second is collections are one of the most important pages inside of your website. And having collection sorting is incredibly powerful and drives higher conversion. So, using that page, thinking about that page, how can you maximize based on the segment? And the third is really putting the right offers in front of the right customers. So those would be the three places I would start on segment experiences, and really make sure that you're hitting those spots. Oh, and one last thing. So we have A/B testing in there. I think it is important to A/B test everything you do. It's great to have a hypothesis, put it in place, but actually measuring your campaigns versus each other and then continuing that optimization process is really where you're going to maximize your value.
Sharon, we could do an entire episode we could do an entire episode of personalization, but we could certainly do an entire episode on A/B testing. So thank you very, very much for your time. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Keith. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening. All of our episodes are available on Spotify, iTunes, and Google Podcasts. A special note of appreciation goes to our sponsors, Rewind.io, the leading backup solution for Shopify and BigCommerce store owners. Get your first month free by responding to your welcome email once you sign up for your free trial on Rewind.io. Cinder is worth considering for your e-commerce accounting and reporting needs. Use a coupon code EasyBooks for up to 40% off. Klaviyo, which helps e-commerce brands easily create personalized, multi-channel marketing campaigns using your most powerful asset, your customer data. To get started with a free trial of Klaviyo, visit klaviyo.com/milkbottle. That's KLAVIYO.com/milkbottle. If you're a Shopify user with an exciting story to tell, reach out to the team on podcast@milkbottlelabs.com. Until next time, take care.